part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action. This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Birthright. You're listening to the Krypton Report.
Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast, now part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I am your host, Tyler. The Superman of Blue, the Man of Tomorrow. We discuss all things DC and DC related. And with me today, I have a special guest. That's right, Mr. James Cole is not here. He's out fighting crime and saving the world. Let's give James an applause. I have with me Mr. Grant Richter. And if you know that name, you're awesome, because Grant is the host of the Truth, Justice, and Hope podcast. So welcome, Grant.
Truth and justice, my friends.
Truth and justice.
I like to think of myself as the Superman in black.
All right.
I'm a big fan of the resurrection suit.
Now, I'm going to ask you this. Did you read the Superman Lois and Clark that Dan Jurgens did?
Yes, that is the episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5 of my podcast.
See, I knew that, but I wanted to bring it up so he could plug his show. I love that suit. I love that black suit a lot, actually. It's actually my favorite. If we're going to go black suit Superman, it's actually my favorite.
Yes, I don't know why they call it the solar suit, and as far as the toys and everything go, but yeah, I call it the stealth suit.
That makes a lot more sense to me, but whatever.
Yep.
You know.
And that is my favorite McFarlane Superman figure as well.
I have that one. I am addicted to buying the McFarlane Superman figures because they come out often. Like before, there'd be a Superman figure here or there, and now they come out so much. I think I have a problem. Yeah.
Like that they do kind of deep dives too. Like the death metal look that looks like Peter Steele from whatchamacallit? Black, number one. That guy. I forget what they're called by now.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
The one thing is, like, I didn't think about this till the other day when I was just kind of like, oh yeah, they just recently released the Grant Gustin McFarlane Flash figure, and I was like, sweet, and I got that because I really like the Flash as well. Then I was like, okay, if you're going to do that, and I had forgotten that McFarlane had done an Arrow figure. I need a Tyler Hoechlin figure.
Yeah, for sure.
You did an amazing job with the Cavill figure. I need a Tyler figure, and then I need you to go backwards. I need a George Reeves figure.
Yeah.
Okay. So McFarlane, you need to start just doing the history of Superman. Give me a deluxe package where you do a whole $100. There's Kirk Allen, George Reeves, Christopher Reeves. Flip that. And even a Dean Cain, all the Superman, I need them all in figure form, okay? And then you can give me a Smallville figure in your style, I have all the Smallville figures, but give me Tom in the plaid.
Yeah.
Or give me a whole big thing of him tied up as a scarecrow. I don't care. I need them all.
That would be really fun. I would like a Tal Rowe figure too from Superman and Lois.
I would like that as well. And speaking of Tal, my buddy Brian, who people know has been on the podcast, he sent me a message. He's like, why is Tal's suit so good?
Yeah.
And Tyler's is not.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, you know what, bud? I don't know.
Yeah.
And, I realized with Tyler's suit, it's the collar test. It's not having the 3D emblem. And then if they had done, his black suit, where they gave him an actual collar on the neckline, looked good. Or if his original suit, the only thing I really liked about his original Superman suit was I liked his chest emblem, being the 3D and the pattern and how large it was, and then where the suit came across his neckline looked good.
The suit neckline, you're absolutely right. The way they do Tyler's suit on the show, it really emphasizes how padded that suit is, which is, and plus the way they do the shoulders, he can't really raise his arms without raising the entire shoulder assemblage of the suit. And that's really unfortunate.
It is. Because, at first I said, when they first started filming, I was like, you know what? Some padding in the suit's fine. One, for stunts, also because it was, shooting during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Maybe he hadn't got to work out as much as he wanted to. Safety, okay, I get that. But then I'm like, let's reduce some of the padding in the shoulders. Like, it just looks a little too much. Mm-hmm. Do you watch Umbrella Academy?
I do. Yep. I just finished season 3.
Me too. We can geek about that later because I have no one to talk to. But my wife sat down and watched with me, and she's like, he is super padded. I was like, well, that's because Luthor's actually part ape.
Yeah,
and like, gorilla. And and she's like, oh, okay. I'm like, and then I thought, like, the way he's padded as Luthor, that's how Tyler's suit looks at times. Like, super over padded, like, but.
I was on, you finished season 2 of Superman and Lois, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I was actually hoping that he wouldn't get his full powers back in the season finale and that he'd go into season 3 kind of lower powered, and it would give him a chance because he's already really buff. He's really cut. He's just not swole. Mm. And I was hoping it would give him a chance to kind of maybe do something like the Authority suit or something like that, where we can bank off the fact that Toller's a ripped but smaller guy.
Ooh, see, when you said that, I thought of the Authority suit. Then I thought of like the T-shirt and jeans look, not the original Grant Morrison one, but the later one.
D2 one, yes.
Would be cool. Mm-hmm. I had almost put money down that this season would have ended with Tal's death.
Yeah,
with him kind of doing something to help save the day, and him being really the savior of the day and dying.
Yeah. I don't like the way Clark got his powers back. That bugged the mess out of me because I'm like, if he has no powers, how is he not dead in space?
Yeah, that was one of those things. I was like,
haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, that was one of those. Like, I didn't mind the whole like Into the Sun thing because we had seen that. It's been done on Smallville. We've seen that before in the comics. But the whole fact that if he has no power, zero, flying to space, he will be dead.
Right. And one thing I'm hoping that they do now, because in the 90s, when he lost his powers during Final Night, he got his powers back by being kind of thrown into the sun and jump-started, which is what led into the blue energy phase. It would be so cool if they did just a few seasons of him having out-of-control energy powers in season 3. I would lose my mind.
It would be really neat to have something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be the whole season arc. It could be something they can play with. And, I listened to a great podcast yesterday talking with Todd Helbring, the showrunner, about, how the writer's room and stuff works. And, they find a way to, in their terms, remix certain things. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be an awesome element to kind of bring in, do something with. I really don't want, like, we're going to record a whole segment on, what we want out of season 3. Mm-hmm. I don't want any more Death of Superman crap.
No.
The idea that Superman had lost his powers in this, that could have been a cool couple episode arc. Mm-hmm. With Jordan having to step up more and stuff. There's different things they can do. And now that they're more free to do whatever they want to do, I'm excited for what season 3 can have.
I just hope there's not another first 3 episodes villain misdirect like in the first 2, like with referring to John Henry as Captain Luthor and then Bizarro showing up in the Doomsday suit. I don't want that. I'm so tired of that. I just give us something completely fresh. Don't give us another, he's Superman's level of power, and here we're going to have a huge punch out. Do something different on season 3, because I like the show, but I'm frustrated with it already.
I'm frustrated with Kyle. Mm-hmm. Just throwing that out there.
Yes.
For many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And certain things, like with the Cushings, I was like, you're drawing this out too much. Mm-hmm. Or, you're putting too much time on this. Get away from this.
Yeah.
Go back to Clark and the family. But So as people can tell, Grant is a Superman fan, and we could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours, and that's not what we're here to do today. But I do have some quick questions just to kind of throw your way. It's always fun when I do this, do my segments where I get to talk with other super podcasters. And the first basic question is, how did your Superman fandom start? Like where, when, what was your first exposure?
Well, my first exposure is like, I'm getting close to 50. And so my first exposure was the Super Friends in 1978, followed very closely by seeing the Christopher Reeves movie in the theaters. And I've been a superhero fan ever since I was a little bitty kid, but I didn't really appreciate Superman growing up because, you know, there was such a prevalence of superhero media, not like it is now, but between the Super Friends and the Superman movie and the different TV shows, you know, everybody knew who the main superheroes was. And so, by the time I started elementary school and I was actually getting comics, I'm like, oh, there's a bajillion other superheroes out there that are worth my time. And everybody knows who Superman was. So I was like, well, he doesn't need me as a fan. And I didn't really come into Superman fandom until about 1.5 years ago, like December of 2020. Like that fall, I signed up for the DC app and I was just tinkering around trying to find something new to read because I was completely burned out on Marvel and I've never really been in the Image. And I, you know, read a little Green Lantern, read a little Green Arrow, and just started reading the Rebirth era. And I just got hooked on the Superman Rebirth era, and then went back and started reading everything from Byrne's Man of Steel and everything in between. And I've just been locked in ever since and making up for decades of lost time.
See, and, you know, I say my stuff all the time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but, you know, I was always a Superman fan. Reading the comics kind of faded because of just access. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of ramped back up more. You know, like I watched Smallville through its run and everything. When it became, you know, starting with Superman Returns, because it became easier to access all Superman media. Mm-hmm. You know, my wife and I talked about the other night, like, when Superman Returns came out, all of a sudden you could finally get the DVDs to everything. Mm-hmm. And that really just helped build that fandom up. Because, you know, I was watching Smallville, but that was really all I had.
Right.
But then when Returns came out, it was such an easy way to get Superman-related material. Mm-hmm. So what's your favorite version of Superman? Is it a comic version, a movie version, an animated version?
It's the comic book version. Now, I like Christopher Reeves' performance in the Superman movies. I'm not a big fan of those movies across the board, though. But I like Reeves. I watched Smallville from beginning to end. Ralph is fine. I love the 90s and 2000s Bruce Timm animated. But for me, I think because I've been doing comics since I was a little kid, because it's the source material, that's always what I like best. And I love what they've been doing with Superman since Rebirth, and shortly since before Rebirth, starting with, you know, the 2-part Superman, Lois and Clark, 2-parter during Convergence. Everything from then on, I've been completely on board with it.
Now, who would you say is your favorite live-action Superman?
Live action? Oof. I'm going to get in trouble with this one, but...
There is no wrong answers. I'm going to tell you. Unless it's David Wilson, then we have to talk off mic.
Right.
There is no wrong answers.
Yeah. I've gone on Twitter recently about who I don't want to ever be Superman again, but I'm not going to talk about that here. I really like Henry's performance as Superman. He's not or for that very narrow alternate reality version of Superman, because even though he's not as friendly, I would say, he's not as open, he's not this shining beacon of hope that we see in the comics. He radiates, when he's not doing angry face, he radiates a lot of kindness and a lot of humbleness, and I like that a lot, especially in the first one, especially in Man of Steel. There's a lot of things about that trilogy I don't like, but I think what I do like somewhat outweighs what I don't.
Mm. Like I said, there's no wrong answer. I will be honest. I sat and I ranked the other night when I was watching the serials with my wife, and I ranked my live action Supermans. Most people always are going to try to say Chris, and he was number 4.
Yeah.
My top 3 can be a sliding scale, depending on how I'm feeling and what's going on. So there is no wrong answer. So my next question would be then, what is your favorite Superman movie? And that can include animated films as well.
Goodness. Honestly, it's going to tie into what we're talking about today, but I love the adaptation of All-Star. I have watched it 5 times since I got HBO Max about a year ago. I love that. And it's because I love All-Star so much.
And we broke that down before. There are things I really do like the animated film did, I think, better than the book as far as telling the story, because I feel like the book kind of did its own thing for a little bit. And in a narrative, in a book it works, but in a film it wouldn't have.
Right.
If you could have one of Kryptonian powers, one of the Kryptonian powers, what would it be?
Super strength and I wouldn't say invulnerability, but increased durability. That has always been my go-to imagination superpower. I've always wanted to be the strong guy. And
it's also practical.
Yeah.
I'm trying to build a fence, and I'm like, gosh, if I had super strength, how much faster could I get this work done?
And I work out a lot, and I have for the past 30 years, and that's part of it, because I want to be the big, strong person that can, can you lift this? Yes. Can you get this down? Yes. So,
I'm in the process of getting back into that because I want to be better for my kids.
Yeah.
Now here's a question that is a little bit different yet similar. Who's your favorite live action Clark Kent?
Oh, Tyler. No doubt, Tyler. I think his Tyler is so geeky without being a dork. Does that make it's or I shouldn't say. I love how Christopher Reeves does the almost physical transformation between Clark and Superman, especially in the 1978 movie when he's in Lois's apartment. But I've always the whole kind of wimpy persona that Clark puts on has always bugged me a little.
I agree.
I love Tyler's. He's such a geek. He's like, oh, look, I got a hat in season 1 when he's supposed to be the assistant coach. He's so fun. He's so enthusiastic about being a dad, and that's just great. I like his Clark better than I like his Superman.
Ooh, interesting.
But I do like Superman.
His Clark. It also it's an interesting argument because his Clark spends so much time with his inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been on record of saying I don't like Chris's his Clark because to me it's too far in the other direction. I think it's an amazing performance. Mm-hmm. I think he does an amazing job of distinguishing the two characters. But if Clark is to blend in and not be noticed, he's too far the other way that he stands out.
Yes.
And also, if he's supposed to be a serious investigative reporter, if he's that bumbling, no one's going to take him serious.
Right.
He needs to be someone that people will take serious if they're going to try to have stories exposed and things like that.
Right. No, I've read very little pre-crisis Superman just because it's not for me. But from what little I've read and, what I've absorbed through cultural osmosis, it does seem in line with how Clark was portrayed at the time, or at least what the public perception of how Clark was depicted in the comics at the time. But I'm not an expert in that field by any means. I've just read a little bit of DC Comics Presents and some pre-crisis Justice League. So I haven't done any kind of pre-crisis deep dive.
Well, see, my buddy Brian, coming up again, he started reading DC Comics when the app first came available, and he started doing it chronologically.
Wow. So
he's been working his way through them, reading all of it straight through. So it's been a really good barometer of okay, how is Clark in the comics at this moment when this happens on film? Mm-hmm. So I always kind of default to him, Brian, let's chat. And it's interesting how the film influenced the comics and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So here's the question I think that really divides all Superman fans. Mm-hmm. Trunks or no Trunks?
Trunks. 100% Trunks.
See? There you have it.
Traditional suit Trunks, I appreciate the rebirth and reborn suits, and, the black suit should, well, I don't know.
The black suit should never have Trunks. It would just be weird.
Yeah, not so much with that. But, yeah, traditional suit, I'm all about the Trunks. I don't know if it's just the traditional nature of it or because the color blocking breaks up the blue better. I don't know, but I think maybe just because it's been what I've been exposed to since I was a little bitty kid. So that's what works for me.
Should the Kents be alive or dead?
Alive.
See, that's what I'm talking about. And then to change it up just a bit.
Sure.
What got you into podcasting?
I've actually been doing podcasting for about 5 years now, and I didn't discover podcasts until about 2016. I discovered them by accident because I'm a big fan of like urban fantasy and weird fiction like that, and I discovered the Night Vale podcast. And so I was like, well, okay, are there comic book podcasts? Yes, Grant, there are comic book podcasts. Here's all of them. And I found myself, like, whatever I'm listening to, if I really liked it, I'll find myself pausing. And then, because I work from home, and I'll find myself just talking back to the podcasters, like addressing what they're talking about. And here's what my thoughts are. I was like, wait, I should probably be doing the same thing. So I've done I was on a Marvel Bronze Age podcast called Into the Weird for about 6 episodes. I did a Captain America podcast for about a year. I did a cable podcast for about 6 months.
Nice.
So I could have an excuse to podcast with my friends that do X-Men podcasting. And then I've been I'm in the process of recording the 1-year anniversary episode of Truth, Justice, and Hope.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's... this brings me to my next question. Did you have any reservations about when you started your Superman podcast?
As far as talking about Superman, no. But can I talk about like what the nature of the show is for a minute?
Yes, please. Okay, because I was going to say that what I find is so many of the podcasters I talk about, we talk about Superman, but we all find our own angle to approach it. So, go ahead.
Okay, so the tagline for the show is that I explore the modern era of Superman comics through a humanistic lens, and I examine real life through the lens of a Superman fan. And so not only do I talk about all the Superman and related comics since Convergence on, but I have a segment at the beginning of the show that I call Thoughts from the Fortress of Solitude, where I talk about everything from real life, from like Father's Day gifts to the recent Supreme Court decisions. And I talk about it from an ethical standpoint. And I try to tie Superman into it as much as possible to kind of keep it entertaining. That's the part that I always have that always makes me antsy. I don't care what other people's opinions about my thoughts on Superman are, but I do get into politics on my show, and I don't particularly enjoy conflict a lot, but I won't shy away from it. But one of these days, I know I'm going to get like an outpouring of hate mail from people on the other end of the ideological spectrum from me, and that gives me a little bit of anxiety. But will I continue doing it? Yes, because one of the kind of the way I end that segment is because that's what Superman would do.
Yeah, and it was great hearing you talk about the Father's Day gifts and stuff, and I had to chime in to you and be like, yeah, I know the feeling when you're like, just give me Superman stuff. And my kids are dialed in enough where my son recently, he got me the Jeff Johns, Gary Frank, Brainiac Superman book. And my wife was like, are you sure Daddy they found a figure, and Solomon goes, Daddy has that. My wife's like, are you sure? He's like, yes. And then she's like, well, what else? He's like, get him this book. He doesn't have it. Yep. And my wife's like, are you sure? He's like, yes. And then they came home and brought it to me, and I was like, that's my boy.
Yep, my daughter's the same way. I have an Amazon list, and I tell my wife, for gift giving time, just pick something from here. I don't care what it is.
Right. That's what, when it comes to
my daughter, are you sure this is, which one of these does he want most? Oh, he wants All-Star the most. Oh, okay. Well, I'll get him that.
It cracks me up just because they're like, what do you want? I'm like, Jania, I literally have broke down category lists on Amazon that you can just go to and pick from. And then if people ask what Tyler wants, I have these lists. They're ongoing. And then my last question is, and this is something that you and I share, and I don't share with anybody else on the podcast. Mm-hmm. You don't eat meat.
No, I have not touched meat since 2018. I am completely vegan. In fact, I don't eat any animal products except for honey.
Same. It started, I don't talk about that much, but it started because my daughter couldn't have dairy. Mm-hmm. So we cut all dairy out of the diet and went with dairy alternatives. And then my wife's like, I want to try cutting out meat, and we've done it. So my question for you is, if we were hanging out and we were going to throw some burgers on the grill, are we going Beyond or Impossible?
Impossible.
All right.
So the Beyond Burgers give me heartburn.
See, and that's how my wife is. She's like, I'll eat Beyond stuff, but she said, I don't always like it.
Yeah.
And what I made her do is I bought a pound of each and we mixed it up and made a meatloaf, and I called it the Beyond Impossible meatloaf.
Okay. The infinite meatloaf.
Yeah, and we've tried other brands like the Incognito, and we found some others here and there of non-meat, and we don't do too many of those, but it is nice to have those as a backup and an alternative.
Right. We also don't eat gluten because my wife's allergic to it, and let me tell you, vegan, gluten-free pizza is not anything I would wish on my worst enemy. That is the most vile thing. But we have it every once in a while because sometimes like, I'm just too tired to cook. What do you want? I guess get one of those nasty pizzas.
Have you tried? It's a frozen pizza. I'm not sure where you can find it, where you are, but it's by the Tattooed Chef.
That's the one that we get, and that's the one we hate the least.
I was gonna say that's the one that I found that I'm like most like I can deal with this. Mm-hmm. So now you're welcome to the Superman Vegan Podcast. Welcome. Yep. Surprise.
Welcome to issue 2 of not Secret Origin, but Superman Birthright, where Superman does not eat meat, and was probably the last time they'll ever be referenced again.
Oh no! If I have my way, it'll be referenced again.
That's what we got that beef bourguignon stuff, and
I got to talk to Mark Waid, and that was one thing I brought up to him was I appreciated it and I liked it, and I found it very believable in the character when they talk about energy, the aura, because we've talked, they've had in the comics Superman's aura and how it protects him, and he can expand it, and even it's touched on here in All-Star. So the fact that he chooses not to eat animals because he sees life energy, it made sense to me. And I think it was something that Wade put a lot of thought into that a lot of people just thought was stupid. And if you step back and think about it, it does make sense.
Mm-hmm. I like it a lot.
Hey, we're going to press pause and hear a few words from our other podcasts on Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. Here's how Books with Brooks works. We read one book a month, and then we talk about it. Classics like Stephen King's The Shining, debut novels like We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang, and tons of other compelling, life-changing stories, one book and 1 month at a time. So come read along with us, and then listen in.
This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
So what we're talking about today is, I brought Grant on to talk about Grant. That's right. We're going to talk a little bit about Grant Morrison, a writer, and then we're going to touch Mr. Richter here, so I don't get him confused. Grant like Grant. Speaking of,
refer to me as he and refer to Morrison as they.
Yeah, then I'll get confused, I swear.
And let me just offer I'm going to try to remember they, them as much as possible. I probably will slip up once or twice just because old habits, because I've been reading Morrison since 1996. So,
and that's how I am. I always try to be, polite to what people prefer, but sometimes you get caught up in conversation and you slip up. And I always try to, especially with, like, introducing people's names sometimes before I get to hear their name, like them say it. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to hit on just a couple of his stories and him as a writer, or Grant them. See, dang it, Grant as Morrison as a writer. So that's what we're going to do, and it'll be fun. It'll be just a good time of chatting and getting to know each other because we have talked online, you and I, and listened to each other's podcasts.
And I have to say, Morrison is one of my all-time favorite writers.
I agree.
At least as far as when it comes to Superman. Like Animal Man, I tried. The Invisibles, I like, but I have to read it like one issue every 3 months because it just. But yeah, his Superman stuff is their Superman stuff. I did it already. Is absolutely sublime to me.
I listen to where's the podcast? I just discovered it's the DC. The podcast is called, and I'm pulling it up right now, DC Standum, and it's presented by Den of Geeks. And I discovered it when someone retweeted that the interview with Todd Helbing. And then I was like, sweet. So I listened to that. And then I was looking through previous podcasts, and there was one with Grant Morrison. So I listened to that yesterday. It was him talking about Superman and the Authority. And that was cool because listening to Grant talk about his work is fascinating. Because a lot of times there's things in it that you may not catch. And, you know, one of the earliest, I don't even know if you can find it anymore. One of my favorite podcasts when I first started listening was Fat Man on Batman. And it was back when Kevin Smith was just Kevin Smith interviewing people about Batman comics and talking about Batman before it became Fat Man Beyond. I don't even listen to it anymore. Listening to Grant Morrison talk about and explain Fifth Dimension and how that works made complete sense. And
they have tripped a lot of drugs and expanded their mind.
You know, he talked about you draw a straight line. That's your time. And then think about taking your fingers and placing them on that line. You're interacting in 4 parts of time. Even though your hand is, you know, right there on the line. That's how something fifth dimensionally would work. And I'm like, okay, that made complete sense to me. So I will say I have never read, and I own it because my friend gave it to me, the Grant Morrison work with Batman Arkham, like where he goes into Arkham Asylum.
Right, yeah, I've never read that either.
Because the font is so small and it's done like handwriting, it's very difficult for me to read. I would love to read it because it's supposed to be one of his best stories, but it was just very difficult to physically read the book.
One of their newer things that they've done that I really enjoy that's not Superman related is Klaus, the kind of their alternate version of Santa Claus. It is amazing. The way it's drawn, and I think it's drawn by Michael Janin, who did Authority.
I think it is.
It looks like Clark Kent stranded on a magic planet who grew a beard and decided to fight for these, oppressed children.
It was what's crazy is I wrote my own Santa Claus story, and then I discovered that, and I was like, "Dang it, Morrison, we're on the same page."
Yep. Good page to be on, though.
Yeah. Mine's different, but it was still enough. Like, okay, we're riding the same vibe. So what we're going to look at, just so we're not too expansive, is we're going to look at Superman and the Authority and All-Star Superman, because I know how much you love All-Star. Yeah. So, and I'm going to just say my little speech here, then I'm going to let you go.
Okay. So I recently read this about a year ago for the first time, because again, I'm relatively new to Superman fandom. And for Father's Day, my wife and my child got me is it the deluxe edition? Yeah, it's the hardback deluxe edition. It's really big. It's got this beautiful, that splash page of Superman flying just below the sun as the interior cover. And then the jacket is him holding the earth in his hands that he's just made. And it's just this amazing, beautiful thing that I've read it twice since I got it. And it's just it's like a coffee table book almost. And it's just this wonderful thing to look at. It smells good. I know that was weird. It has like this really high glossy paper, and it's got all these really neat little extra bits in the back, this kind of behind the scenes stuff about the Ultra Sphinx and how all these different covers. And something I didn't realize is that back in one of the reasons that Morrison apparently jumped from DC over to Marvel is DC turned down this idea of, he had an idea that was kind of like Ultimate Spider-Man or the Ultimates, where it was going to be a completely separate continuity universe. It was going to be ongoing stories called Superman Now. And he has, apparently Morrison does his own sketch work and his own storyboarding, and he doesn't go into a lot about it, but it's really fascinating. But anyway, as far as the content of this book, was there anything specifically that you wanted to talk about, or should I just ramble on forever?
You're fine, because what I find fascinating about All-Star, the first time I read it, I didn't hate it. I just was like, okay, I like parts, but other parts, and I have a more appreciation for it, and I like it. There's still some parts I don't like in it. I'm not a big fan of Bizarro. Like, as far as reading Bizarro in comics, I do not enjoy having to read the improper speech. It gets a little exhausting at times. Like, when it's one or two lines and the characters there is fine, but when it's on Bizarro World, Bizarro this, and it gets to be a lot. So I don't really care for the Bizarro parts of that story, though I do feel there is a good, story beat to it.
Yes. That's the part I usually kind of skim through. I don't like Bizarro stories in general. The only version of Bizarro that I've ever liked is the one from the animated series, the one who's just kind of a simplistic but violently well-meaning guy.
Yes.
But even that, I've kind of realized from people talking about it, it does come across as kind of an infantilization, which can be taken as kind of a slight towards mentally challenged people. So I'm like, oh, well, even that then is maybe not great. So yeah, that is really the only part of this that I'm not crazy about. Honestly, even if I'd been a Superman fan in 2005, I probably would not have gotten this, because I really, at the time, did not like Frank Quitely's work on X-Men that he did with Morrison. And I think he leans into the grotesque a little more with that one. I think it was intentional.
Yeah.
To kind of show, the kind of almost alien nature of the X-Men. So if I'd seen this, I wouldn't have gotten it, but I've really developed an appreciation for Quitely's artwork since, and especially the color work in this particular book is just gorgeous. Who's the colorist on this? I forget. Jamie Grant. It's really, really good. But it's just fascinating to me in this one how Morrison takes all these kind of weird Silver Age tropes that can come across as silly or childish from the way they were written in the 60s or in the 50s, when, the only thing that kept Superman alive was the fact that, as far as publication-wise, was DC cowing down to the Comic Code Authority and making him like elementary school age, child friendly. We take all these things and just like like one of the tropes of the Silver Age is Superman can do whatever is necessary for the story.
Yes.
And I think that's reflected in how Superman gets so overpowered by his basically solar poisoning, expanding his bioelectric field. It comes across as, like honestly, my favorite part about all the Christopher Reeve movies is when he does the cellophane shield that he throws at Non in Superman 2.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of the same thing. It's like, well, what do we need Superman to do in this? Well, we've written him into a corner. Let's make up a new power. The bioelectric field reminds me of that. when Dr. Quintum is testing Superman's strength and he's pressing 200 quintillion. That reminds me of the Silver Age, where Superman could just move planets around at will. And speaking of which, I love Dr. Quintum. I love that Morrison and Whiteley ever went back and just did a continuation of this universe just about Dr. Quintum and all his insane science. I think that's fascinating.
That would be fascinating because, this is for anyone who doesn't know, which it happens, it is a self-contained story.
Yes.
For years, I didn't quite understand the ending because I've read it, I want to say 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I read it back in maybe 2011 or 2013, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay. I was like, all right, that was that. And I remember I had the first issue because I got it for a free comic book day one year, and I read the trade. Now we go back, and people talk about it being the great. I watched the movie, and I was like, wait, I thought there was some other stuff in this. Okay. So I go back, and I just hear people talk about how much they love it, and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, okay, I just bought it. I went to the comic shop, I bought it, I read it, and I was like, okay, I can see. And, some time goes by. We recently did a comparison of the book versus the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. And I think each time I go back, I like it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I understand more of where they're coming from with the story. The Silver Age stuff, the mythological angle of the story, because just reading it, if I just read it, I don't like where the Samson and part goes. Like I'm like, okay,
yeah.
I'm just like, I could deal without this. But then over time, I've come to appreciate it and like it more.
Yeah,
it's not my favorite Superman story, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there. Like the Lex stuff is really good.
Yeah.
The ending, I had forgotten about, Grant's Superman and the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
And, because it always felt like it was just another Death of Superman story to me. And that was something I always struggled with, was why is every Superman story that matters about Superman's death?
Right. And I think that's what's interesting too, is that it's not necessarily a death. It could be read that way, but it shows him. I think if anything, I think that he's not dead at the end of it, but he is trapped in the sun almost, where he has to stay inside the sun to keep this, it's in the notes. Morrison actually says Superman builds a new heart for the sun. And I think he's there empowering that heart to keep the sun going. And then once you get into all the stuff about the descendants of Superman, it could be that they're descended from one of the, I don't know if it's a Superman clone or another empowered Superman that Quintum makes, but it does show that Superman has a legacy after this, implying that he does come back at some point and has descendants.
Correct. And, like I said, there's multiple ways to read it, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
I also really like the way it quietly draws the trunks to where they're more like a trunk.
Yeah, it's like he's wearing shorts over his costume almost. They're like strongman trunks.
Yes, and not so much as they became more brief looking over time. Mm-hmm. So I really do appreciate that from an artistic point. But the story is fascinating because of the levels that you can keep mining and digging. Now, do you prefer the book or the movie?
I prefer the book for a slow burn, for just I'm having a crappy day and I want to cheer myself up. I'll put on the book.
That makes complete sense to me. Because, when we did the comparison, I said, you know what? There's things I like in the book that's not in the movie, but there's things I'm really glad they cut out of the book for the movie because of the pacing. Because the pacing of the book is almost like you can read part 1, read part 2, and for most of them, they connect, but they're not like continual.
Yeah.
It's like chapter blinks in time.
Yeah. It reminds me of how like TV shows were done in the 90s, like Buffy or something, where every episode is self-contained, but they have a running through subplot. They're all connected, but they're each individual story. They're almost episodic.
Right. Exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
One thing I loved about this, you can tell this is such a love letter by Morrison to Superman 2, is when, and in the first chapter of it, when he's back at Quentin's lab and he's being tested, and Quentin's psychic assistant is examining Superman's DNA, and she's like, "Oh, it's like reading Bach," and that's awesome. In addition to like metal and other things, I'm also a big fan of classical music, especially Bach. So I'm like, yes, I don't know why. It's beautiful.
It is. And that's why I have such a love for movie scores, because I feel like in a lot of ways it keeps kind of classical style music alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to ingrain that in my children, as well as I have a whole disc of movie score stuff that they listen to and they appreciate, and it's important for them to understand where music comes from in a way, and the different sides of music.
I like modern music that's done that I don't even know if it has a defined genre. It's just called epic music, where it sounds like it could be used in a movie trailer. That I like a lot. And jumping from the beginning to the end, I love when, not only do I love Lex's green and purple suit at the end, such a callback to the kind of Super Friends era Luthor, but I love it when he has Superman's powers and it's being sped up through time and gravity and all that, and Lex realizes that one of the reasons that Superman is as good as he is because his senses allow him to see how we're all connected. And that's just lovely.
Yes. Like the Lex stuff of this book is perfection.
Mm-hmm. Especially when he's in the prison and they're running away from the parasite. That is just Lex personified. Yes. He's constantly like 3 steps ahead of the parasite, and he's dismissing Clark, but at the same time complimenting him and telling him to keep up, while at the same time he doesn't realize that Clark is saving his butt about every 3 seconds.
I really like the conversation that they have, that Lex talks about, being his idea of the Superman, how he's human, and he does the whole feel this pure muscle, know. And it's a great version of Lex Luthor.
It's all ego driven. I am me because of how he's the ultimate bootstrap story. Like taken to the nth degree and perverted.
Now, not on the flip side, but the other big, more recent version of Morrison's work, is Superman the Authority.
Yes.
Now, this book is great. Mm-hmm. And I listened to Philip Kennedy Johnson talk about how the original plan was for something to happen, and it ended up not lining up as perfectly as they wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
Between, the Superman the Authority is really like the side story that's happening at the same time there's other things happening. So when we get to the point in the main Superman title in action, and where it connected, Superman in action and the Authority all kind of connected, it would be this straight flow, but it just didn't quite work out that way.
It doesn't, no. And I remember reading this the first time, and I made notes about it when I reread it for this episode, that I have to wonder, I hadn't read that interview with Johnson, and hang on, let me go mute my Alexa before.
Oh, you're fine.
And the family's talking to each other. Where I had assumed that Morrison intended for this to be its own separate continuity or something, because there are so many moments that are like, wait, that doesn't match up with modern continuity at all. Like, for example, at the very beginning, when he's in the 60s and he's talking to JFK, and then it's implied later that he's been around since the 60s. And like, yeah, it was a time travel fluke and I ended up in the 60s, but I've been here ever since. Like, where are we, Grant? I don't know, but I'm happy to be here.
Yes. And it was kind of like, what? When the part with him and Kennedy showed, I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Right.
Where are we? Who is this?
And I think Johnson clarified it later and said, oh, well, that's just a time travel thing, which is fine. I was like, oh, okay. But I think because they were, came out a month apart and I wasn't binge reading them like I did this, and I was like, wait a minute, I get that it was time travel, but Manchester Black says, well, you've been around since the 60s and now the world has turned on you. When did the world turn on him? That didn't happen. But okay, I'll take your word for it.
Right. It was just enough to kind of throw everything off, but at the same time, it was enjoyable, and I highly recommend trying to listen to the interview with Grant, because Grant does such a way of articulating his stories where you're like, I get it.
Yes.
Compared to if I was trying to tell you what Grant said. Mm-hmm. I like the story because it's weird because I love Superman being super powered, but then at the same time I love seeing Superman losing his power, but still being Superman, still being that same person in his. Mm-hmm. Are you currently reading Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It is art. It is I love it so much.
And I feel like that's such a true to who he is story.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, like the Authority, like first of all, I love the suit.
Yes, the suit is great. I want an action figure of that so bad.
Right. That's another one of like the McFarlane, like you're doing these comics, like you did the Superman and the Superman Clark Kent or Lois, dang it, it's a mouthful. Superman, Lois and Clark, black Superman suit. Give me that Superman the Authority suit. Because I love the graying hair, the symbol calling back to the Kingdom Come style.
Midnighter that calls him Sexy Dad Superman.
Right. Like that's me. Okay. Like that's me as Superman.
Right.
One thing that I have loved, you mentioned like Rebirth Era, is as tacky as it sounds. The year that they wrote John Kent Conversion was 2015 when he was born.
Yep.
That's the same year my son was born.
Oh, that's cool.
So the same year that Superman becomes a dad, I became a dad. So I really latched on to that story, to this version, to the rebirth Superman. And then for all of my days, I will hate Bendis for aging up John.
See, because I didn't come into reading Superman after John had been an adult for maybe a year or two, I don't have the attachment to John the way people do who read it month to month as it was coming out. I like it. I think it's a ton of fun. I actually like John better since he's come out. I think that warms him to my heart even more like this. Mm-hmm. And I know Taylor's getting a lot of hate from people on both sides of the ideological spectrum. Some people are mad at him for making John queer, and some people are mad at him for not making John queer enough.
That's such a horrible argument. Like,
and I think those coming from the left are just pretending to come out from the left. I think those are straw man arguments. But I have my own version, and just to jump topic again, I have my own version of like your story with your child being born the same year that John was born. I got married 5 days before Lois and Clark did in the comics.
Nice.
Yeah, I got married on November 30th, 1996, and then maybe not like, at least as far as when it came out on book stands, like I saw it in Walden Books like later that week for the first time. So as far as release date, I got married just a few days before Lois and Clark.
See, that's awesome. And what's funny too is my wife and I got married the same year that the Smallville ended.
Oh, cool.
And in that, like, you know, the last episode is Clark and Lois trying to get married. Mm-hmm. So it was just kind of funny that happened. It's so, you know, I got the awesome time to meet and talk to Dan Jurgens. And, you know, that was one thing that he said, because I had him sign my Convergence and my Lois and Clark Superman book. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one thing he said he missed writing John at this age. I'm sure. And you could get the sense that he wasn't happy with them aging him up. And it's weird because I like John in the, you know, Superman Son of Kal-El book. Tom Taylor's doing an amazing job. I think Taylor's a great writer. I'm loving his Nightwing as well. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I miss reading, like, Tomasi's Super Son's, you know, 11-year-old John. Like, right. I was rereading some of that with my son. Mm-hmm. And I like that John as well. So I do see both sides of the argument, but in continuity, I kind of miss having Superman being the dad to a younger child. Yeah. You know, because being a dad to an older child who's an adult is a little bit different because you're not in the thick of it as much. Yeah. And I like having him, you know, as a father to between 8 and 11-year-old, depending on which book you're reading, because he is a little younger in the Superman Lois and Clark than he is when you get to the Rebirth continuity.
Yeah, especially the way Tomasi and Gleason wrote John. He is just a delightful scamp.
Yeah, he's great, and it makes me happy to read those stories. Mm-hmm. I even made a homemade, like, hoodie of John's Superboy costume hoodie, an outfit for my son when he was, like, 3 or 4, and he was wearing around, like, the hoodie with the ripped jeans and, you know, the shoes and everything.
Yes, that's kind of fun.
So, but back to the Authority.
You were saying about how you like it when Superman is depowered but still very powerful. Like, there's I think in issue 2, there's a scene where he's bench pressing this massive weight that's like 3 stories tall, and then it shows him on the, like, almost like a cosmic treadmill going 1,200 miles an hour. He's really still freaking strong and fast.
Yeah.
For someone who's, he just can't fly. And I like that. I like that kind of, I like him being an adventurer. There's something very visceral about that, you know, and having to use the Corgi toy Supermobile from the 70s is just cool.
It's neat because it's like one of those things, like if you buy Superman toys, it's like, all right, you got a cape and a symbol.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And an action figure. All right, we're done.
Yeah.
You know, but Batman, you're like, you get a mask, a cape, a belt, 30 different suits, a car, a plane, a jet, you know, like. Yep.
Speaking of which, have you seen where McFarlane is doing their own version of the Mattel Superpowers collection?
Yep, I was online yesterday searching for it. I plan on going to Walmart and Target within the next couple of days, see if I can find one.
I think they're Walmart exclusives.
See, I saw someone post they found one at Walmart and it was like $10. I was like, sweet. So I need to go find it because I'm addicted to buying Superman toys.
And I like the fact that their version of the Supermobile is the 70s version and not the 80s Mattel version, which is more boxy. I like the kind of round, goofy looking one with the big fists.
It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Authority book, I did like the team. I thought the team was interesting. Mm-hmm. And then the one thing I wanted to ask you as a fan and as a comic reader, so Midnighter's husband, Apollo, mm-hmm. his name blanked for a second, and then it came back. His power is like of the sun. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, and it hasn't happened in the story, why is his power not helping to bring Superman stronger, bring him to life more?
I don't think it's about him not getting enough sun. It's about him not being able to process the sunlight as much. So it's kind of like it doesn't matter how much he gets. I think it's a good metaphor for getting older and your metabolism slowing down.
And I like that. I will agree with you. As soon as you said that made complete sense.
Yeah, and it's I'm glad they did that because it's kind of like how, you know, obviously Apollo was supposed to be Wildstorm's analog to Superman, And it's kind of like since Dr. Manhattan came back, there's been no place for Captain Atom, which I think Captain Atom's fascinating because, I'm not a conservative myself, but it's interesting when you see a conservative superhero and how they play off of other superheroes that tend to lean more to the left. So I think Captain Atom's a fascinating character, but they've kind of done away with him since Dr. Manhattan's part of main DC continuity. I'm glad that DC has kept using Apollo and Midnighter. I imagine they probably would not have if they weren't like the premier queer couple of the DC universe, almost.
It's interesting because they're like the tough guys.
They are.
You know what I'm saying? Like, often when they do these type of relationships and these couples, they tone them down. But Midnighter is like, for lack of a better term, a man's man, and that takes on a new meaning in this context. So it's fascinating that they do keep him around because he's such a violent character at the same time.
Which puts him into, really interesting conflict with Superman, as we're seeing in Johnson's Action Comics run. We've got to blow up this plane. We've got to do this to save you, Superman. Well, if you do that, the whole planet could die. Well, it's worth it. No, it's not.
Exactly. And that's what makes the ideology discussion fascinating. And I think that's another thing that Morrison brings that's really is deeper discussions about the superheroes and what they represent and what they can represent and what they should represent. Especially when writing Superman. I like the Ultra Humanites in it because he's a character that most familiar with is the version that was on the Justice League Unlimited series.
Yeah.
But he is, the oldest Superman, like super villain as far as super powered villainy.
Yes.
And he has a unique history. So it's awesome that was back in the different ways that he transfers his brain and things. It makes a unique story.
I love that they put I like that one that he's cloning his brains. So he's making himself into a collective of one. And so he can put, all different versions of his brain into different bodies. And it shows like a T-Rex that I think was used at one point and all these other things in different 8 bodies. But I like that he puts his brain in Grundy because I like Grundy. And I love the fact that he's teaming up with Brainiac because Ultra Humanite and Brainiac are my 2 favorite Superman villains. And so that just made me squeal with delight. And the spoke Brainiac in a business suit is sexy. Yeah. It's like Morrison wrote this series for me. I love the Corgi Supermobile. I like a lower powered Superman. I love Apollo and Midnighter. I like Natasha Irons as Steel, and
I do like her because she has the way to represent kind of like we were talking about getting older and your kids taking over. He can kind of see that as an analog for John and how he has her there and he's putting someone else's. It's in this continuity. It's Steele's niece, right?
Yes.
I had to think for a second. I had to pause.
Yeah.
Because how things get mucky when you are exposed to so much.
Yeah, it's not Natalie from the show. It's Natasha from, It gets to be overwhelming when you're reading different books. And in this book, this is this. And in this book, this is this. It can be overwhelming. Trying to remember everything, every detail. I think her Steel suit is more striking than John's.
I agree.
That hair tail thing comes out of the back of her helmet. I think that's really cool. I love her introduction in this book where she's fighting different versions of the internet come to life, like bots and trolls and edgelords. That is the funniest thing I've read in a long, long time. In issue 2 of the series. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's funny because it's like literally taking on the internet.
Yes.
It's fighting all the internet crap that we hate about it.
Yes.
In a physical form.
I was just hoping he would throw a 4th one in there, having people like sentient things that are like building gates around stuff, like literal gatekeepers or something. But,
that'd been cool.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I tend to ramble. I also like Enchantress's introduction in the book where Superman's literally ready to go to hell to just extend his hand and say, "Come with me, I will help you." That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. That's him. That's him summed up in a single line.
Yeah, we were talking about music a minute ago. I like melodic hardcore as well, and there's a band called Rise Against. In one of their songs, the chorus is, "Take my hand, I'll promise not to ever let you go," and stuff like that, where it's just helping someone bring themselves up from their darkest place where they are emotionally and mentally, and being their, choking myself up, being their support system. And that's something I love about Superman, is where he's always ready to help everyone that's at their lowest.
Just got to swing life away.
Yeah.
Everyone goes to the All-Star Superman Grant Morrison part with the girl, Regan, who wants to commit suicide, which is great. I love that. But I like the other one in Superman, I think it's Superman Grounded, part 1, or is it, I'm thinking of it, where the girl's ready to jump and he floats up there with her and he stays there all day.
Wow.
And then she jumps into his arms and he just holds her. Mm-hmm. That one to me is more powerful. Mm-hmm. But they're both extremely powerful.
Right. There's a similar scene in the Thy Kingdom Come arc of the 2000 Justice Society of America, where the Kingdom Come Superman comes to the main continuity, and it's almost like the Justice Society, it comes across as them keeping him not prisoner, because they know they can't hold him there if he doesn't want to, but it comes across as him breaking out, because you as the audience think he's heard something that's made him mad, and he smashes his way out of the compound to go save this girl who's about to commit suicide. And the same vibe, it's fantastic.
It is. And I know we're jumping around talking about different stories, but that's, the character. And that's what we're here to discuss. At the core of our conversation is the character and the different ways that it's representative, and showing that the reason why we can pull these other stories in the conversation is that Grant Morrison is a fan of the character.
Yes.
And what I was going to say is to kind of, shepherd us into a conclusion, because we could go on forever talking, and that does happen occasionally, is I would really like to see Morrison write another Superman story self-contained.
Yes, definitely.
Something where he has the freedom to explore any and all avenues he wants with the character. Sometimes my favorite Superman stories are self-contained. Mm-hmm. It's great to read continuity of Superman. It's fun. But then it's also nice to just pick up a graphic novel, read it, enjoy the character, get a full story, and not be weighed down by previous knowledge, continuity, and all the things that go with that.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I like Up in the Sky so much.
That was an interesting story. I enjoyed it, but it was very interesting. A couple times it took a weird route.
Side trip, yeah.
But then it came back.
Yeah. But is there, outside of these two books, do you have a favorite Morrison Superman moment?
If I had to just go moment, it would be the saving of Regan.
Okay.
It speaks so true to the character, and it's so real. And I think it's something a lot of times that I wish more people would just take the time to recognize other people's pain.
Yeah.
And just be there for them, when all you have to do is just literally be there, open to them, that I think we can all learn from. Mm-hmm. That is so simple for any person to do to the people around them and for the people around them.
Absolutely.
That would be the one moment I would have to say.
Right. There are a couple other stories that I read for this just in preparation, because I wasn't sure exactly what direction we were going. I reread his JLA run, and
I wanted to do that. I just didn't have time.
Yeah, I totally get it. After Rock of Ages, I feel like that series, his run kind of meanders a bit. But I have to say, just for sheer coolness factor, the Rage of Angels storyline, the two-parter that introduces Zariel, where that's the only real use of Superman's energy powers, what I thought was done extremely well, is he turns himself into a giant electromagnet to move the moon and then fist fights an angel. That is just a sheer cool factor. Outside of these two stories, that is hands down my favorite.
That is cool. I don't know if I've read that. I often said, to me, the energy powers would have made a lot of sense if they had followed up the death of Superman with that story.
Yeah.
As if him coming back to life is what altered him into those powers. Mm-hmm. So it almost extends out that Superman story in a way that we haven't quite got back to our regular Superman yet.
Yeah.
We're still going on this journey of what the after death looks like.
Right. I don't hate the long hair, but I don't love it. I don't hate the energy powers. I don't love it, but it bugs me that throughout the 90s, it's like, well, we need to make Superman something different than the traditional way that people think of Superman. And I think, and as much as I respect Jurgens as a writer, and I see him as the kind of main writer of the Superman books during that time, I see him as kind of like the compass steering the ship. It bugs me they couldn't just let Superman be Superman after the death.
Yeah, but I think that's also editorial, too. I mean, they had 4 titles going on still, I think.
I get that.
So, I mean, you as the writer might, hey, I want to do this. Nah, that doesn't align with this. And you're just like, okay.
Yep.
You're like, I'm going to do the best I can.
Yep, I hear you. It is, sometimes editorial is the foot that gets stuck in the mouth of good storytelling.
That is a very well said sentence.
Thank you.
So we're going to kind of wrap it up there today. Grant, I want you to go ahead, plug your show, where people can find you, where you most interact with people.
Sure.
Anything, kind of final thoughts on anything that you just kind of want to let our listeners know about?
Sure. Again, the name of the show is Truth, Justice, and Hope. It's the platform I do it on is Anchor, so you can find it directly at anchor.fm/Truth, Justice, and Hope, but it's on all the major platforms. It's on Apple, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, all those places. And I put out usually about an episode a week. Like I said earlier, I started with Convergence in 2015, and I'm only up to about October of 2016 now because I cover the issues in detail, and I only have time to do 2 issues an episode. So it's very slow going, juggling like 7 titles with only 2 issues per episode.
That's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable listen to.
But it means I'm never going to run out of material because by the time I cover a month's worth of stuff, they've put out like 2 or 3 more months worth of material at the other end of the spectrum. So I'm never going to run out of material. But I'm on Twitter @AboutSuperman. I talk about Superman a lot there. And I do different reading categories. I have one called the Bendis Breakdown, where I started at the beginning of Brian Michael Bendis' run and kind of exploring it through hindsight, now having read it and seeing what bugged me the first time going around that I appreciate more. I do one called the Spinner Rack Experiment, where I've started reading Superman comics starting in 1982, which is when I started getting and reading comics on a regular basis, to say, well, would I have liked this if I was reading it as a little kid, if I'd been in Superman? And then I do read through the reboot Legion of Superheroes and all kinds of different stuff. So I try to keep and I do tend to talk about politics a lot on my Twitter as well. So I know that can be a turnoff to some people, but again, it's what Superman would do.
I mean, he's got to stand up for what's right.
There you go.
And, if we can't, as a society, if we can't at least talk about things and discuss things in a mature context, we really have lost ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, Grant, thank you for being on this episode of the Krypton Report. We appreciate it. We're definitely going to have you back for something in the future. We'll figure it out as we go. That's all. That's what life is. Just figure it out as we go.
Absolutely.
And remember,
and fight fear at every turn with an open mind and an open heart. Love ya.
Look up in the sky.
We just want to say, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please check out other podcasts on the Press Play Podcast Network. Remember to check out Krypton Report on all social media platforms. Go to linktree.com/Krypton Report. You find all of our information right there. And if you want to keep Krypton from exploding, join our $1 a month Patreon. That's right. For $1 a month, you'll get extra special content that you don't get on the main show, like movie commentaries and whatever else comes out of our mouths. So check it out, patreon.com/Krypton Report.
If you are like Tyler and James and can't get enough super talk, check out these other podcasts. Digging for Kryptonite, Supergirl Radio, The Last Sons of Krypton, the Superboy Legacy Podcast, All-Star Superfans, Superman the Animated Podcast, The Aspiring Kryptonians, Always Hold On to Smallville, Caped Wonder, The Geek of Steel, and Truth, Justice, and Hope Podcast.